Hare Krishna. So yesterday we began the fifth chapter, Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness, with Arjun's question, Sannyasa or Karma Yoga. So then the second section we completed also of this chapter, wherein Krishna emphasized how Karma Yoga is equal to but easier than Sannyasa. Karma Yoga is better. And then how Karma Yogi can be a true sannyasi, and Karma Yoga and Sannyas are the same. On the other hand, mere renunciation is just difficult thing. It's not so easy. And then we also began the section performing Nishkama Karma Yoga frees one from bondage. So that is from the seventh verse. So the seventh verse describe the characteristic of Yoga Yukta, one who is engaged in such Karma Yoga. What are his characteristics? The point is that he is never entangled. So he is Vishuddhatma, Vijitatma, Jitendriyaha, Sarvabhutatma, Bhutatma, Kurvanapi na lipyate. That was first verse. Please recite eighth verse now.
Pritish Prabhu.
नैव किञ्चित् करोमीति
Naiva kinchit karomiti
युक्तमन्यते तत्त्ववित्
yukto manyeta tattvavid
प्रस्यान् सर्वन् प्रसन्
पश्यन् सर्वं प्रसञ्जिघ्रान्
असनान् गच्छन् स्वोपन् स्वसन्
ashnan
गान्
gachan
गच्छन्
swapan
स्वपन् स्वसन्
shvachan
प्रलापन् विसर् विसृजन् गृहणन्
pralapam
लपन्
visrujam
विसृजन्
grunhan
ग्रहान्
उन्मिश्रो उन्मिश्रन् निमिषन् अपि
unmishan
उन्मिषन्
nimishan
निमिषन्
api
अपि
इन्द्रियाणि इन्द्रियार्थेषु
indriyani
इन्द्रियाणि
indriyartheshu
इन्द्रियार्थेषु
वर्तन्त इति धारयम्
vartantra
वर्तन्त इति
iti dharayan.
धारयन्.
Translation. A person in the divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, and breathing, always knows within himself he is actually does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects, and he is aloof from them.
Yeah. So these verses are describing how a living entity, such a yoga yukta person, the one of the characteristic of yoga yukta person is he is jitendriya. He is sense controlled worker. Now such a sense controlled worker is doer yet non-doer. He is doer also, but he is non-doer also. So such a knower of truth, tattvavit. Tattvavit word is coming here. Knower of the truth. So although he may be doing various activities which are like normal for any other person, but he does not do them in a one sense he does not do them because there is only he has understanding that it are only material senses that are interacting with their objects, and as a spirit soul he is aloof from them. So Prabhupada in the purports he writes that a person in Krishna consciousness is pure in his existence, and consequently he has nothing to do with any work which depends on 5 immediate and remote causes. What are those 5 immediate and remote causes? The doer, the work, the situation, the endeavor, and fortune. Karta, karya, then this paristiti, karma, and daiva. So basically, he is like aloof, although he is acting, but he is aloof from them. He is like a detached worker. So His Grace Rajashambhru gives one example of like this thing, coconut. So just like a coconut which is kacha, it is very much attached to the shell. But if you see dried coconut, it comes, if you sometimes dried coconut is there, I don't know whether you have ever observed it, but the dried coconut you can even ring it like this near your ears, and you can see that the shell in the inside, the thing has become detached from the shell and it has totally come out. So although it is within the shell, but it is not attached to the shell. So same way, a person who is a karma yogi or tattvavit person, he is, although functioning in this world, although he has body, although he is within this world, but he understands that he is aloof from all these things. He is aloof from the various actions, various situations, the various types of endeavors which are happening in this world by himself or by others, and the various types of fortunes and misfortunes. So in this way, although he appears to be acting, with his body and senses, he's always conscious of his actual position, that is spiritual engagement. So this is described about Prahlad Maharaj also, that he was such a personality that although he was acting in this world, but he was so absorbed in the Lord that the various day-to-day activities of his life, like eating, passing stools, or walking or seeing, these things happened almost as if he is not doing them. Means what, they have to happen almost automatically without his putting kind of lot of efforts and consciousness into it, because his consciousness was fully into Supreme Lord. So in material consciousness, Prabhupada says senses are engaged in sense gratification. So that's why there is an attachment with the material world. But in Krishna consciousness, the senses are engaged in the satisfaction of Krishna's senses. So once upon a time, Srila Prabhupada, was asked by one of the new devotees, Swamiji, what is the goal of life? And Prabhupada said, sense gratification. So he was little happy. Prabhupada said, not yours, Krishna's sense gratification. So goal of life is to give Krishna sense gratification, not that you have to satisfy yourself. So such a self-realized person, Krishna conscious person, is always free. Although he is appear to be engaged into varieties of activities of this world, he is not attached, and that's why he's free. Like that coconut, although it is within the shell, but it is, it has become detached from the shell. So this is the characteristic of such a person, that he is doing things of this world, but not so much into, not with the attachment. He is doing them with detachment. So now Krishna describes the transcendental knowledge that we are not these bodies. He is telling that this transcendental knowledge that we are not these bodies, that should be expressed through practical work. So this knowledge allows us to remain aloof from the body as we work. So everybody is working, and how much he has become self-realized and advanced in spiritual life is very evident from the way he is working, from the way He's thinking, feeling, willing, working. So in his work, also these things are, the symptoms are visible. In his activities of day-to-day activities, his symptoms are visible. How much he has become Krishna conscious, how much he has become advanced in spiritual life. So we see that our bodies are acting, but a person who is karma yogi, this one who is engaged into karma yoga, nishkam karma yoga, he has no interest in the fruits of his actions. This is one of the symptoms, that he is not interested to enjoy the fruits. He may be acting, but he wants to offer all the fruits to the Supreme Lord. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, this one symptom. Also, he acts with detachment, so that is also visible. His detachment is visible also through his day-to-day actions. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he explains that Nishkama Karma Yogi, even while acting with his body, senses, and so on, is a Tattvavit. Why? Because he realizes that the self is separate from body. He realizes that I am different from this body. Now, the question is, does the work of such a detached person, it result in any sinful reactions? Does it give any sinful reactions? So the answer is given in the next verse. Please recite 10th verse.
Priya Arjun bro.
Yes. ब्रह्मणि आदाय कर्माणि
ब्रह्मण्याधाय कर्माणि
संगम त्यक्त्वा करोति यः
संगम
Sangam
त्यक्त्वा
त्यक्त्वा
करोति
करोति
यः
स पापेन
लिप्यते न स पापेन
पद्मपत्रमिवाम्बसा
पद्मपत्रम् इवाम्भसा.
One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme Lord, is unaffected by sinful action, as the lotus leaf is untouched by water.
Yeah, so this is very famous analogy. Padma Patra Vivambhasa. So, having said that, Karma Yogi is not the doer of actions, yet he does actions. So, Krishna now is going to explaining that such a yogi, he acts for the sake of Supreme Lord, and because of that, he is not entangled into this material world. He is aloof from the sinful reactions of that world. So, also, the point to be mentioned is that the soul is not the independent doer of the actions. So there are others also who work along with the soul. So Brahmani Adhaya Karmani, one who offers results of his actions to the Supreme, Brahmani, Sangam Tektva Karoti Saha, Yaha, while performing his duties, Sangam Tektva, without attachment. Lipyate Nasa Papena, is unaffected by the sins of his actions. Padma Patram Ivambhasa, just as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. So recently there was a boat festival temple some months back. So there are so many lotuses in our temple, Vrindavan Chandra temple. So you see these lotuses, they are, so I was there and I was, wanting to experiment this Padma Patra Ivambhasa. So really, I took some water and put on that lotus leaf, and really, that lotus leaf was completely dry. The water just went out again into the source. It just drifted away, or the water droplets, they just went away. So in this way, such a person basically is in this world but not of this world. This coin terminology is there. I think Shamanand Prabhu or somebody says such a person is in this world but not of this world. So purport Prabhupada says that everything in the material world is the manifestation of Brahman. And although effects are differently manifested, they are non-different than the cause. So one sense, Sarvam Khalu Idam Brahman. Everything is caused by the Brahman, but there are different effects. Now one who knows perfectly well that everything belongs to Krishna, Krishna is the proprietor of everything, and that's why everything should be engaged in the service of the Lord. Naturally, such a person, he has nothing to do with the results of his activities, because he understands that everything comes from the Lord, and that's why everything has to be offered to the Lord. So there is one shloka in the South India, they recite this: Bhagavato balena, Bhagavato virena, Bhagavatah karmana, Bhagavatah karma karishyami. So he says that Bhagavato balena, by the strength which comes from the Lord, Bhagavata viryena, all the various paraphernalia given by the Lord, Bhagavatah karmanam, as per the desire of the Lord, Bhagavatah karma karishyami, I do the activities which are ordained by the Lord for me. And in this way, what happens? Such a person, he is he's not attached to the things of this world. And that's how he has nothing to do with the results of his activities, whether they are virtuous or sinful. And that's how he is freed from the reactions of that. So if one tries to enjoy in this world, then one is bound by pious or sinful reactions. But if is not trying to enjoy, if one wants to offer everything to Krishna and acts on behalf of Krishna, then there is no question of any reaction for him. Neither there is sinful reaction, nor there is pious reaction. So in this way, such a person goes beyond the contamination of sinful reactions. And Prabhupada says, just like lotus leaf, although remaining in the water, does not become wet. Lotus seed remains in the water, but it does not become wet. So that's how one should be situated in knowledge, and then do one's duty with detachment. So such a person, he will perceive the body's actions, it's working, it's touching, it's doing many things, but things he understands that I am not doing anything. I am a soul and I am aloof. I have nothing to do with this matter. Nothing to do with this material world. I am completely aloof. That is the realization of this person in the knowledge. Now, with this realization, one can perform his duty without attachment and then surrender all results to the Supreme Lord. So, I heard that His Holiness Gopal Krishna Goswami Maharaj, when he was in his Grahastha life, previous ashrama, so that time he is the best example for this, because he used to work, and although he had a family, but he used to give all his money to Prabhupada. Of course, many others also did so, but he was a householder. Still, he used to give all the money to Prabhupada. And then his former wife, she would come and Prabhupada would give her some money for her household maintenance. So in this way, he is the best example to perform the duty without attachment, at the same time surrendering all the results to Krishna. So this is the topmost example. So at least to some degree, one should surrender our results to Krishna. If not to this level, if one is not able to do this level, at least to some degree one should do. So in this way, work remains free from sinful reactions. Just like Padma Patra Ivambhasa, just like the lotus is untouched by water. So lotus leaves, they have got waxy, some kind of wax is there, the waxy surface is there. And as soon as we put some water droplets, the water immediately glides off. So same way, a person, although in this world, but he is not contaminated by the actions and reactions of this world. So reactions glide off a person performing karma yoga. Now, the question may be raised that if somebody is detached from the work because he knows that he is spirit soul and not this body, then why he is working at all? So you will see that some of these things are quite similar to what we discussed in the third chapter. थर्ड चैप्टर में भी थोड़ा बहुत इसके सिमिलर चीजें आई थी. So there is third chapter karma yoga, again there was in between jnana yoga, again Krishna is explaining some karma yoga. But now what is the difference is that here he is explaining karma and karma yoga and jnana yoga on a parallel lines. So now what is the purpose? So if you remember in the third chapter it was mentioned also that first of all Krishna said that nahi kaschit kshanam api, ek second tak koi vyakti bina kaam kiye reh nahi rak sakta hai. Working is a must. Remember that was a shloka. That everybody must have to work. There is no question of somebody remaining idle. So that is one thing, that one is obliged to work anyways. Apart from that, what is a motivation, what is a goal of person who is self-realized? Then why she should work in this world at all? So karma yogi, why he is working then at all? If he is detached from the work, he knows that his body, he is not this body, his spirit soul, then what is the purpose of his working? So that is mentioned in 11th verse. Please recite.
राहुल प्रभु. रास रसिक प्रभु.
कायेन मनसा बुद्ध्या
कायेन मनसा बुद्ध्या
केवलैरिन्द्रियैरपि
केवलैरिन्द्रियैरपि
योगिना कर्म कुर्वन्ति
योगिनः कर्म कुर्वन्ति
सङ्गं त्यक्त्वात्मशुद्धये.
संगम त्यक्त्वात्मशुद्धये.
Translation: The yogis, abandoning attachment, act with body, mind, intelligence, and even with the senses, only for the purpose of purification.
Yeah. So now this verse is mentioning what is the purpose? The purpose is purification. He wants to purify his heart, and that's how a person works. So Atma Shuddhaye, for their own purification. So this is the one goal and motto of a person to do anything, especially for a sadhaka. This is very important, that because person who is siddha, there is no requirement of purification for him. So he works only for welfare of others. But a person who is in a sadhaka stage, who is not fully pure yet, so the goal, his motivation for working should be self-purification. Yeah, please read purport.
When one acts in Krishna consciousness for the satisfaction of the senses of Krishna, any action, whether of the body, mind, intelligence, or even the senses, is purified of material contamination. There are no material reactions resulting from the activities of a Krishna consciousness person. Therefore, purified activities, which are generally called sadachar, can be easily performed by acting in Krishna consciousness.
That's it. Thank you. Yeah. So when a motto of such a person is purification, how he gets purified? He gets purified by kaya, manasa, vacha. By his mind, words, and activities. When he engages kaya, manasa, vacha, through body, mind, and words, when he engages himself in the service of the Lord, to the degree he engages himself in the service of the Lord, to that degree his existence becomes purified. So mind also, body also, and words also should be engaged in the service of the Lord. That's how they become purified. And that's how when they do such things in the service of the Lord, then there are no reactions. So Srila Rupa Goswami, he mentions, Prabhupada quotes Rupa Goswami from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, this very famous verse, Iha yasya harer dase karmana manasa gira nikhilashu api avasthasu jivan mukta sa uchyate. So such a person, he is acting with his body, mind, and words in Krishna's service. Such a person is liberated even while remaining within this world. Although he may appear to be engaging in so-called material activities, but he is actually liberated. So he is not, again, he is in this world, but not of this world. So one of the primary symptom of such a person is that he knows that he is not this body and that his body does not belong to him. You understand, this body is not also mine. Actually, Krishna is the owner of the body also. In fact, he understands that not only body does not belong to him, he himself belongs to Krishna also. So in this way, body and he himself both belong to Krishna. So he understands he is a spirit soul, part and parcel of Krishna, and that's how he is belonging to Krishna. He is servant of Krishna. Also, this body, which is made up of 5 elements and 8 elements, you can say, is also Krishna's different energies, and that's how they also belong to Krishna. So when he applies everything produced of body, mind, and intelligence, word, life, wealth, etc., Prabhupada says, whatever he may have within this possession, to Krishna's service, he at once doubted in Krishna. So that's how Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Manas deho geho jo kichu mor arpilu tu apade Nanda Kishore. So he says that I offer everything, O Lord, to you, because it is, actually belongs to you only, and even I belong to you also. So even I belong to you, and in this way, one becomes Bhaktivinoda Thakur is the ideal example, wherein he is offering all his things within this world, and that's how he is liberated, even though he may be staying within this world. Yeah. So this is the summary of particularly all previous 5 verses. Now, next 4 verses answer the question Krishna has already discussed in 3rd and 4th chapters, namely, who is the doer? This has been discussed before, but again Krishna reiterates it. Who is the doer? The living entity, material nature, or Paramatma. So in the first 4 verses, Krishna is going to describe Jivatma's role. What is his role? So please recite 12th verse.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Rahul Prabhu, you can read now.
Yeah. Yukta karma phalam tyaktva
Yukta karma phalam taktva
santim apnoti naishtikim
shantim apnoti naishtikim
ayuktakam kamakarena
ayuktah kamakarena
phale sakto nibadhyate.
phale sakto nibadhyate.
The steadily devotee soul attained unadulterated peace because he offers the result of all activities to me. Whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled.
Yes. So Krishna is going to give summary in this verse. A karma yogi, he attains unadulterated peace, naishtikim shantim. Yeah, shantim apnoti naishtikim. So that is naishtikim shantim. How? By giving up the results of all activities, karma phalam tektva. Whereas a karmi, so karmi and karma yogi, there is a difference Krishna is delineating here. A karmi, or one who works with his desires, being greedy for the results, becomes entangled. Ayuktah karma karena phale sakto nibadhyate. He becomes entangled. So this verse, Krishna is talking about karma yoga versus karma. So performing actions without attachment leads to liberation, and performing action with attachment leads to bondage. So it is not the action itself which causes liberation or bondage, but it is the consciousness in which the action is performed that causes liberation or bondage. Okay. So Prabhupada also purport, he says that a difference between person in Krishna consciousness and person in bodily consciousness is that the former is attached, whereas the latter is attached to the result of his activities. So what is our attachment is also decides what is our state. A person who is devotee, he is attached to Krishna. A person who is not devotee, he is attached to the results of his activities. So everyone is in between these stages, in between these two stages. Either one is attached to the material world. So our attachments are also indicative of, what is our stature in Krishna consciousness. To the degree one is attached to this world, to that degree he is on the platform of karma. To the degree one is attached to Krishna, he is on the platform of devotional service. He is in the platform of Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada writes further that in the Bhagavatam, the cause of anxiety over the result of an activity is explained as being one's functioning in the conception of duality, that is, without knowledge of the absolute truth. Why one has got anxiety of the results of any activity? Because one is in the conception of duality, insult and fame, or glorification, or insult, happiness, distress, this is the duality. So because one is caught up in this conception of dualities, so that's how person is anxious for the results of his activities. But Prabhupada says in Krishna consciousness there is no duality. All that exists is the product of Krishna's energy, and Krishna is all good. So we see Srila Prabhupada himself demonstrated this quality, because Prabhupada remained the same when he did not get any success and when he got success. Both times, certainly it is very natural to feel happy when one gets success and feel morose when one does not get success. But the point is that how devotedly one performs one duty in Krishna consciousness. So when Prabhupada had no success, in India, so many years he struggled, and also for some years in West, but he was devoted to his duties in Krishna consciousness, his activities in Krishna consciousness. He never gave them up. At the same time, when he got success also, that time also he remained same devoted personality. He did not say, चलो अभी हो गया, अभी भक्ति विक्ति करने का जरूरत नहीं, अभी सब जो करना था वो हो गया. He remained the same devoted person for his duties in Krishna consciousness. So that's how a person in Krishna consciousness is filled with peace. But Prabhupada says one who is entangled in profit calculation for sense gratification cannot have that peace. His mind will be always disturbed. This is the secret of Krishna consciousness, the realization that there is no existence besides Krishna. And this is the secret, this is the platform of peace and fearlessness. So this is a very advanced platform when one realizes that there is no existence besides Krishna. And that platform, person has peace and fearlessness, complete peace and fearlessness. So now Krishna will explain how the pure soul is the doer, yet non-doer, knowing which one can be detached, understand the supreme and attain liberation. Yeah. Okay, so please recite 13th verse.
Ravi Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu. सर्वकर्माणि मनसा
सर्वकर्माणि मनसा
संन्यास्ते सुखं वसि
संन्यास्ते सुखं वशी संन्यस्यास्ते सुखं वशी. Yeah.
नवद्वारे पुरे देहि
नवद्वारे पुरे देहि
नैव कुर्वन् न कारयन्.
नैव कुर्वन् न कारयन्.
Translation: when the embodied living being controls his nature and mentally renounces all actions, he resides happily in the city of nine gates, the material body, neither working nor causing work to be done.
So this verse is describing the role of the soul. When the embodied soul works by mentally renouncing manasa, sannyasa, all actions, he resides happily in the city of nine gates, material body. So material body has got 9 holes, 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, mouth, anus and genitals. In this way, he is neither working nor causing work to be done. So please read purport.
Purport. The embodied soul lives in the city of 9 gates. The activities of the body, or the figurative city of the body, are conducted automatically by its particular modes of nature. The soul, although subjecting himself to the conditions of the body, can be beyond those conditions if he so desires. Owing only to forgetfulness of his superior nature, he identifies with the material body and therefore suffers. By Krishna consciousness, he can revive his real position and thus come out of his embodiment.
Yeah, that's
Therefore,
it.
when
That's it. Thank you. Yeah, so in Bhagavatam also, it is written in first canto that Yaya sammohito jivam atmanam trigunatmakaha paropi manute anartha tatkrutam chadhipatyate. So it is said that the living entity, although superfluous to all these material miseries, actually he has nothing to do with material world. Actually, he is beyond this material world, and that's how he is superfluous to material world. But we do sammohan, due to that ignorance, sammohan, he considers himself to be atmanam trigunatmakam. He considers himself to be product of 3 modes of material nature, and he considers himself to be the doer of the activities which are done by 3 modes of material nature. So Prabhupada says here in this purport is that the body, activities of body are conducted automatically by its particular modes of nature. The way body is conditioned in 3 modes, these 3 modes automatically run the various functionings of the body. So as long as the soul is attached to the body, the soul thinks that he is the doer of various activities. So that's why previously, if you remember this shloka, prakrute guna kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashah ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. If you remember, that shloka was there before. So although 3 modes of material nature are performing, they are performing various activities of this body, but a person who is under the illusion or under the false ego, he thinks himself to be doer. So if soul desires, he can be free from the this bodily functionings, if he so desires. But how he will desire? First of all, there should be knowledge that he is a superior energy. He is superior to material nature. And unnecessarily he is suffering because of thinking himself to be the doer. So Prabhupada says, by practice of Krishna consciousness, one can revive one's position and in this way come out of such embodied conception of life, thinking himself to be product of material nature and thinking himself to be the doer of activities. So Prabhupada says further, in such a controlled life in which his deliberations are changed. So when one is engaging in Krishna consciousness, his deliberations are changed. What one deliberates upon, again, this is another point. Previous verse we discussed about what is one's attachment. Another thing is that based on our attachment is our deliberation. Because we generally deliberate on those things which we are attached to. So a Krishna conscious person, his deliberation changes from material world to the spiritual sky. So although because his deliberation is changed, although he may be staying in material world, actually is staying in the spiritual world. And in this way he stays happily in the city of 9 gates. And Prabhupada is quoting Shvetashvatar Upanishad, Navadware pure dehi hamso lela yate bahihi vashi sarvasya lokasya sthavarasya charasya cha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is living within the body of a living entity, is the controller of all living entities all over the universe. The body consists of 9 gates, 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, 1 mouth, the anus, and the genitals. The living entity in his conditioned stage identified himself with the body, but when he identifies himself with the Lord within himself, he becomes just as free as the Lord even while within the body. So it is the matter of identification. जीव कृष्णदास यही विश्वास कर ले तो आर दुख नाय. If a living entity identifies himself with the spirit soul, with the Supreme Lord, then he becomes as free as Supreme Lord is. He also is free from all material entanglement. But if he identifies with his material body, then he is subjected to the actions and reactions of this body. So just like nobody thinks because I live in a city, I am the city. Do we think that I am Pune or I am Mumbai? We do not think like that, right? Similarly, such a person, self-realized person, he does not identify himself with the city of this material body. So we are living within the city. Of course, sometimes people have a lot of attachment to their city also. So they identify with the city also. हमारे पुणे को कुछ नहीं कहने का. I love Pune. These days, all the cities they have these signs. I love this city. I love that city. Isn't it? So, but a person, who is little more knowledgeable, he understands that city is just a facility for me to stay. That's it. Like that. So neither does he think himself as doing nothing. He neither identify himself with the city of this material body, nor a person thinks that I should not do anything now. He endeavors, but knows the success ultimately depends on the powers beyond him. He endeavors, he tries his best, but leaves the rest on the Lord. He understands that the success depends on the powers which are beyond him. He is not the only contributor for the success. There are many other factors for success. So in this way, he offers whatever results he gets from his activities to the Supreme Lord. Kayena vacha manasendriyarva बुद्ध्यात्मना प्रकृते स्वभावात् करोमि यद्यत् सकलं परस्मै नारायणायेति समर्पयामि. Shri Krishna arpanamastu. Whatever I do with my body, mind, intelligence, I surrender unto the Supreme Lord. And in this way, with this consciousness, he does his duties, he does endeavor, but he also understands that things depend on the Lord. So do your best, but leave the rest on the Lord. What result does he achieve in such consciousness? So that is mentioned in the next verse. Please recite 14th verse.
रोहित प्रभु.
Yes, Hare Krishna. न कर्तृत्वं न कर्माणि
न कर्तृत्वं न कर्माणि
कस्य सृजते प्रभो
लोकस्य सृजति प्रभुः
न कर्मफल संयोगं
न कर्मफल संयोगम्
स्वभावस्तु प्रवर्तते.
स्वभावस्तु प्रवर्तते.
Translation: The embodied spirit, master of the body of his body, master of the city of his body, does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature.
Yeah. So if you want to know, there are more details about City of Nine Gates in the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatams in Puranjan Upakhyan. If you read, there are a lot of details and it is nicely mentioned through proper allegory. So in this verse, 14th verse, the role of material nature is given. Previous verse, the role of soul was given. Now the role of material nature is given. So Jiva, master of his body, does not act, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of his action. All that is enacted by his Swabhava. Whatever is enacted by Swabhava. What is that Swabhava basically? Swabhava is a particular nature. So we say na inka swabhav aisa hai, inka nature aisa hai. What is that nature? Basically the typical combination of three modes of material nature. तीन सत्व रजस तमस का कैसा combination उनके ऊपर act हो रहा है, that is what becomes a स्वभाव of a person. So स्वभाव, it indicates the beginningless material impressions, vasana, arising from the beginningless identification of the jiva with material body and senses. So since time memorial, living entity is identifying his body and senses, and that's how he has got various types of desires and impressions, that is called vasana. And those vasanas impel a person to act. Thus, the jiva may be alternately be said to be impelled by material nature. Like that. So in this verse and section, Krishna reiterates his instructions in verse number 3.27, third chapter, 27th verse. Krishna had told this similar concept. So Prabhupada says in purport, somehow the superior nature, living entity, has been in contact with material nature since time immemorial. Nobody remembers since how long. It is very difficult to trace out since how long one is in contact with material nature. The temporary body or material dwelling place which he obtains is the cause of varieties of activities and the resultant reactions. So due to this swabhava, person engages into varieties of activities and it causes resultant reactions. Living in such a conditioned atmosphere, one suffers the results of the activities of body by identifying himself in ignorance with the body. It is ignorance acquired from time immemorial that is the cause of bodily suffering and distress. As soon as the living entity becomes aloof from the activities of the body, he becomes free from the reactions as well. So due to ignorance only, living entity thinks himself to be product of material nature and to be also the belonging to this material nature. So this is the ignorance which makes living entity suffer. But as soon as a living entity comes in the knowledge, then he understands he is not this body, spirit, soul. He becomes aloof from the activities of the body. Then he becomes free from the reactions also. So the realization a person gets who is practicing this karma yoga is that he's simply in the midst of material ocean struggling for existence. Actually, he has nothing to do with this material world, but he is in the material world struggling for the existence. The waves of the ocean are tossing him and he has no control over them. So his best solution is to get out of the water by transcendental Krishna consciousness. That alone will save him from all turmoil. So by the process of Krishna consciousness, one can be saved from the turmoil of material existence. So that's what Prabhupada says in the purport. So the gist is that the living entity within the body does nothing. Krishna, just to emphasize the point, even repeats the word na 3 times. 3 times the word na is used in this verse. Na kartutvam, na karmani, na karma phala samyogam, like that. So in this way, conditioned soul, he does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he control the fruits of even his own activities. All this happens by material nature. Now, who controls the material nature? 3 modes of material nature. It is Supreme Lord. So now, often people understanding this omnipotence of the Supreme Lord, they wrongly conclude that responsibility of all actions and reactions falls on the Supreme Lord. So we will say it ultimately 3 modes of material nature are acting, right? But who is controlling 3 modes of material nature? Supreme Lord. So because Supreme Lord is the doer, he must also be responsible for my sinful actions. Why then should I receive the reactions for what is being caused by super soul? जो भगवान कर रहे हैं उसका मुझे क्यों reactions मिल रहा है? So to remove this misconception, Krishna speaks the next verse. Please recite next verse, 15th verse.
सौम्य प्रभु.
नादत्ते कस्यचित् पापं
Na datte kasyachit papam
न चैव सुकृतिं विभु
na chaiva sukrutam vibhuhu
अज्ञाने नावर्तं ज्ञानं
adhnyanena vrutam jnanam
तेन मुह्यन्ति जान्तवः.
tena muhyanti jantavaha.
Translation. Nor does the Supreme Lord assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge.
Yes. So now in this verse, the role of the Lord is given. First two lines describe the role of the Lord. That Supreme Lord Vibhu, he does not assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. He is simply the witness and sanctioner. So because of Jiva's knowledge is covered by ignorance, adhnyanayana vritam jnanam, they are bewildered, muhyanti. So in this way, the point is that soul desires, superfluous sanctions, and material nature fulfills the desires. So Prabhupada is talking about the Supreme Lord in the purport that he is called as Vibhu. He is always satisfied in himself, undisturbed by sinful or pious activities. He is not disturbed by anybody's sinful or pious activities. He is always self-satisfied, Atmaram. He does not create a particular situation for any living entity. It is not that Lord is giving particular situation for a particular living entity. But the living entity, bewildered by ignorance, desires to be put into certain conditions of life, and therefore, thereby, his chain of action and reaction begins. So it is not that Lord is putting. Generally, people blame the Lord. हमारे साथ भगवान ऐसा क्यों कर रहे हैं? But it is not like that. Lord is not causing anybody to suffer or enjoy. It is simply based on what one desires, and based on our desires one performs various actions, and that's how one deserves certain things. It is not that the Lord is making any particular situation for any living entity. A living entity is by superior nature full of knowledge. Nevertheless, he is prone to be influenced by ignorance due to his limited power. Because the living entity is prone to be influenced by a mode of ignorance, and that's how he desires various things, and that's how he deserves various things, and Lord simply sanctions those things. So Prabhupada says the Lord is Vibhu or omniscient, but the living entity is Anu. So Lord is called as Vibhu, living entity is called as Anu, atomic. Because living entity is a living soul, he has the capacity to desire by his free will. Such desire is fulfilled only by the omnipotent Supreme Lord. And so when the living entity is bewildered in his desires, the Lord allows him to fulfill those desires, but the Lord is never responsible for the actions and reactions of the particular situation which may be desired. So Lord is allowing the living entity, he is atomic part and parcel of the Lord, and that's why Lord has got unlimited free will. Living entity also has got limited free will. But when living entity wants to act in ignorance in material platform, Lord also allows, he sanctions the desires of living entities. So he can understand, Prabhupada says further, he can understand the desires of this individual soul, just as one can smell a flower, flavor of a flower by being near it. As soon as you come near a flower, you can understand the fragrance of the flower. Similarly, the Lord is situated right next to the soul, and he can smell the desires of the soul. And he can, that's how he understands what the soul is desiring, and then he he sanctions it based on the karma. Desire is a subtle form of conditioning for the living entity. The Lord fulfills his desire as he deserves. Man proposes and God disposes. So desire is a subtle conditioning. It's like based on our conditioning, one desires various things. So person in mode of goodness prominently is in mode of goodness, he desires some things. Person in mode of passion, he desires something else. And person in mode of ignorance, he desires something else. And Lord smells those desires, and based on his karma, what he deserves, he fulfills those desires. The individual is not therefore omnipotent in fulfilling his desires. The Lord, however, can fulfill all the desires, and the Lord, being neutral to everyone, does not interfere with the desires of minute independent living entities. Because he is neutral, udasin, he does not interfere with the desires of living entities. So they want to act independently, they want to do anything, Lord allows them to do whatever they like to do. However, when one desires Krishna, then Lord takes special care. and encourages one to desire in such a way that one can attain to him and be eternally happy. So when somebody turns to Krishna consciousness, when somebody turns to Krishna, then Lord doesn't remain neutral anymore. Then the Lord comes into the action, into the field, and he takes special care of such a person and encourages one to desire such in such a way that one can obtain him and be eternally happy. So otherwise,
sorry, Prabhuji. Please, can you repeat that when God comes in action?
huh?
When God comes in action means I mean
God comes in action means Lord now, that's what he says. Prabhupada says, if you just read the purport. However, when one desires Krishna, the Lord takes special care and he encourages one to desire. So in general, other desires are not encouraged by the Lord. Lord just neutrally observes them and just sanctions. If he deserves, Lord sanctions. So he just is a udasin Paramatma. But when somebody desires Krishna, Lord comes into the field, and then he also encourages, inspires the spiritual desires within the person. He also takes special care of a person. So he gives up his neutrality, and in this way he tries to encourage a person, inspire a person to come more and more near to him and be eternally happy. And in this way Prabhupada quotes Kaushitaki Upanishad and all that, like that.
Guruji, same super soul acts as a Bhagavan. Is it
Yeah,
like that?
yeah, it's like that only. Same super soul, because super soul is after all expansion of Bhagavan only. So
Yes.
like that. Therefore, the embodied soul, by his immemorial desire to avoid Krishna consciousness, causes his own bewilderment. Consequently, although he is constitutionally eternal, blissful, and cognizant, due to the littleness of his existence, he forgets his constitutional position or service to the Lord and is thus entrapped by the nescience. Under the spell of ignorance, the living entity claims that the Lord is responsible for his conditional existence. So, who is causing his own problems? The living entity is responsible for his own problems, basically. He wants to avoid Krishna, and in this way he gets bewildered, and in this way he forgets his constitutional position, and thus is entrapped by nescience. He is entrapped by Maya. So because of desiring to be away from Krishna, avoiding Krishna, living entity gets trapped by ignorance. And in this spell of ignorance, living entity blames Supreme Lord only, that you only have caused my condition here. You are making me suffer. You are causing my conditioned nature. It is not that Lord is causing his conditioned nature. It is living entities, his own desires and his own activities, his own ichha and karma. Based on that, Lord is simply giving him. Sometimes living entity feels things that I will do anything I like, and Lord should simply give me happiness. So that is not possible. So there has to be some system. So now in this verse we see how Krishna is advancing his description of the progression of transcendental knowledge. So this transcendental knowledge will take us from knowing ourselves as soul to being liberated by becoming fixed up on the super soul. From soul is bringing up to super soul. So basic transcendental knowledge, it helps us to understand that we are not our bodies, but from the 14th text we understand that the modes of material nature control our bodies. Both the modes and living entities are controlled by Supreme Lord. Although super soul is the ultimate controller, he is not responsible for the living entities' activities or reactions to them. Now somebody may argue that because the living entity is not the doer, he must not be responsible for his actions and reactions. No, it is a faulty argument. The living entity, though not the doer, is also not completely aloof. The living entity must accept the responsibility for his own actions. Why? Because he is the initiator of any activity by his desires. So whole thing, super soul and material nature, facilitate the things only based on the desire of the living entity, not otherwise. So His Grace Bhurijan Prabhu, he quotes 10.87.25 Bhagavatam purport. He says that although the soul is in truth both conscious and active, the proponents of Sankhya philosophy wrongly separate these two functions of living force, Atmani Yecha Bhidam, ascribing consciousness to the soul, Purusha, and activity to material nature, Prakriti. So according to Sankhya Karika, Tasmacha Viparyasat Siddham Sakshitvam Purushasya Kaivalyam Madhyasthitam Drashtutvam Akartrubhavascha. Since the apparent difference between Purushas are only superficial, being due to various modes of nature that cover them, the Purusha's true status is proven to be that of witness, characterized by his separatedness, his passive indifference, his status of being an observer and inactivity. Tasmat tat samyogad अचेतनम चेतनावद इव लिंगम गुणकर्तृत्वे ही तथा कर्तेव भवति उदासीनः. Thus, by contact with the soul, the unconscious subtle body seems to be conscious, while the soul appears to be the doer, although is aloof from the activity of nature's modes. So basically, they are saying that because soul is aloof, he is not performing any actions. Material, it is a material nature. Through gross and subtle bodies taking any actions, soul is aloof, and that's how he is not. Basically, he is helpless. Soul is helplessly being controlled by the three modes of material nature, and soul cannot do anything about it. So now, Srila Vyasadeva, he refutes this idea in Vedanta Sutra. He says in the second volume, third chapter, 31 to 39, Vedanta Sutra, Vyasadeva says, Karta Shastrartha Vatvat. The Jiva soul must be performer of actions because the injunctions of scripture must have some purpose. So if there is, the soul is helpless, he cannot do anything about the actions, he is like out of control, then where is the question of any scriptural injunction for him? What is the use of studying Bhagavad Gita and any other scripture? There is no use, because anyways we cannot do anything about ourselves. हम कुछ भी नहीं कर सकते if we are helpless that state. Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan in his Govinda Bhashya explains, the Jiva, not the modes of nature, is the doer. Why? Because the injunctions of scripture must have some purpose. Shastrartha Vatvat. For example, such a scriptural injunction as Swarga Kamo Yajeta, one who desires to attain heaven should perform ritual sacrifice, and Atmanam Eva Lokam Upasita, one should worship with the aim of attaining the spiritual kingdom. This is from Brahmand Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. They are meaningful only if a conscious doer exists. If the modes of material nature were the doer, these statements would serve no purpose. These statements are useless. After all, scriptural injunctions engage the living entity in performing prescribed actions by convincing him that he can act to bring about the certain enjoyable results. Such a mentality cannot be aroused in the inert modes of nature. Modes of material nature are inert. That kind of shastric injunctions become useless. Any instructions become useless if the living entity is not at all the doer or is simply helplessly being controlled by three modes. How the living entity is tight in the tight grip of material nature is that the doer can be compared to attempt of a small boy to lift a weight he has just seen his father lift. Or sometimes the example of driver is given also. Child wants to drive the car. Okay, anyways, we can take this example only what Prabhuji is giving. So now small boy, he has seen that his father is lifting some weight. The boy first desires to lift the weight and then tries. He cannot possibly succeed. But his father sees his small son's desire, stands above him, and out of affection does the actual lifting. He will tell the boy, you just hold, you just put your hands on this weight. And the father lifts, and the boy is simply holding the rod, that lifting, in between rod, weight ke beech mein. Thus, the father has actually lifted the weight, but he cannot be considered the only lifter. One may say father ने उठाया ना, बच्चे ने थोड़ी उठाया, तो उसको क्यों responsible रखना है? No. Unless the desire has been expressed and the attempt made by the child, the father never would have helped and the weight would not have been lifted. It was the desire of the child, it was the attempt of the child. That's why father tried to lift the weight for him. So same way, the living entity should not, like a child, become bewildered by false ego and pride and consider himself the doer of activities, because in all cases he actually has no independent ability to act. A living entity being a minute, he cannot have independent ability to act. That does not mean, however, that the living entity can avoid the responsibility of having performed the activity, because it was he who expressed the desire, he who made the attempt, and it is he who then tries to enjoy the fruit. That's why living entity is responsible, neither material nature nor the Supreme Lord. When the living entity is ignorant of his eternal relationship with Krishna, he chooses his position as independent enjoyer, which in turn welds him to material nature. Welding, you understand? Welding they do. So same way, when living entity wants to enjoy his position, he wants to imitate Krishna and wants to be independent enjoyer, then he becomes welded to material nature. And that's how he is placed under the control of material nature. So that's how he is responsible for his own reactions. Although the living entity is not the ultimate doer, he still remains responsible for his actions and their results as long as his actions spring from his desire to turn away from Krishna. The super soul acts as living entity's best friend and fulfills his desires. Even though he is the supreme controller, he cannot be held responsible, accountable for living entities' choices, for he acts only as a sanctioner. The super soul, being neutral, is neither responsible for anyone's actions nor is he liable to accept living entities' good and bad reactions. This is knowledge. Krishna describes the results of understanding this in the next verse. So Dhritarashtra, he also told Vidura, what can I do? When Vidura was telling, Arey, your son is going to cause big trouble, whole thing. It is going to destroy the entire Kaurava dynasty. So, and you should do something about it. You should try to control him or you should try to discipline him. So now what he said, Dhritarashtra said that, what can I do? Actually, everything is done by the Supreme Lord. Everything happens under the Supreme Lord's will. So what can I do? I cannot do anything about it. That time, so this is the philosophy which we read from that Sankhya thing. But that time Vidu tells, no, you have free will and Lord does not control your free will. So you can do something about it. At least desire, at least make an attempt, at least try. So it is not that you are in a totally helpless position. So in this way, there is a very clear-cut understanding Krishna is giving that the soul is not the ultimate doer, because there are many other doers, material nature and Supreme Lord. But at the same time, the soul is responsible. Why? Because he is the initiator of any activity by his desires. And that's why he is responsible for any reactions which come due to actions. Okay. So we'll stop here because we are already over the time. So this was a very crucial discussion. That's why we had to go, take long. So now we'll continue the next Thursday, 16th verse onwards. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Granthara Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So there is one question here. Does pure devotee exhibit emotions like happiness and distress when he gets material problems, despite the fact that he will do his daily spiritual duties in any situation? Does he become completely emotionless towards the material world and worldly relations, or does his emotions get transformed? Instead of seeing them in terms of bodily relation, he sees them as object of service given by the Krishna under his care. Yes, pure devotee also may undergo some emotions because he is not a stone. And as you said, so just like when Abhimanyu died, Krishna, he says, Arjun, he cried. It is not that because he heard Bhagavad Gita, so now there is no emotion in Arjun. He cried because he understood that Abhimanyu, was his son also. At the same time, Abhimanyu was also one of his, he sacrificed his life in the mission of Krishna, and that's why he was crying. But he did not deter from his duty. So pure devotees also have emotions. But those emotions, pure devotees' emotions are directed by the knowledge, and also his further actions are specifically directed by the knowledge of his duties. So emotions are there, emotions are the, originally emotions exist in the soul itself, in a pure spiritual state there are spiritual pure emotions are there. So it is not that pure devotees become totally like a stone or machine or robo who will just do some activities. No, they have emotions, but these emotions don't control them. They are controlled by the right knowledge. They are controlled by the right knowledge, and that's how they try to dovetail those emotions in the service of the Lord. Like that. Is that okay? Yeah, Rasarasik Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Guruji, thank you. So, Guruji, sometimes we hear like that means भगवान की इच्छा के बिना एक पत्ता भी नहीं हिलता है.
Yeah, that
So,
is true.
so means what kind of action got considered from our side as a human being? Means कभी कभी क्या होता है कि we do and we get results. We didn't get results as per our wish. So we means then why should we work? Why should we execute anything? How we can establish?
As a devotee, as we discussed before, what is our motto of working? It is for purification of the heart. One engages into various activities out of purification of heart. Now the question is that I may desire, still, I don't get the result. I may try to act also, still I don't get the result. Why? Because we may not deserve. The super soul does not sanction the result, but we continue to act. Eventually there will be result. So it may be not that we have not sufficiently acquired the pious credits to get our desire fulfilled. For a devotees, it may be harmful to him, and that's why super soul does not sanction it sometimes. For a general person, there may not be sufficient pious credits. That's why his desires not get fulfilled immediately, but eventually they'll get fulfilled. Eventually they will get fulfilled. So surely the desires are stored, they are noted down by the Lord, and when the right time comes, his desires will be surely be fulfilled. It is not that person will remain without that. Now so that's how, when you are asking that why should we act, that's why when we act for the pleasure of Krishna, as a service to Krishna, which will bring purification of the heart. So that is the impetus of devotee. See, even though we are performing our ordinary activities of day-to-day life, like your job, your this thing, but we should do it as a offering of service to Krishna. So offering of service to Krishna means actually it should be done service to Krishna, not that we just imaginary level we think that it is a service to Krishna. Like that. We should be also visibly acting in service to Krishna. So that way, because we act in that spirit of service to Krishna, one gets purified, and this is our motivation. Is that okay? Or something more you wanted to ask?
No, thank you.
Yes, Prabhu. Priya Arjun Prabhu, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Guruji. Guruji, this Prakriti Pramanani verse. So there it is said that the living entity is forced to act by the modes of nature. So my question is that when we say that the living entity is forced to act by the modes of nature, we still have to consider that whether or not the living entity has to be controlled by the modes of nature, that is within his hands, and that is why he is responsible for the actions that he does. Is that correct?
Yes. Living entity is forced to be act by three modes of material nature, but who has acquired three modes of material nature? It is by his own desires and activities living entity has acquired three modes of material nature. So that's why it is not that he is in a totally helpless situation now, he cannot do anything about it. The living entity can desire differently and make some attempts to come out of that particular combination of three modes of material nature. And gradually he will be able to come out of that combination. But living entity has to desire. So those desires are developed in good association through proper scriptural studies, through proper association, through proper education, through proper knowledge. Right type of desires can be cultivated. And when cultivates right type of desires, then one can, because one can, when one's desires are changed, especially when one will take to Krishna consciousness, then Supreme Lord will also help living entity to change the influence of three modes of material nature, or in the utmost state, totally remove the influence of three modes of material nature upon him. But that's what, when three modes of material nature are inducing a person to act, but these three modes are how they are inducing. Three modes are being ordered. Basically, material nature is being ordered by the Supreme Lord to act for the living entity. But why does Supreme Lord tells material nature to act for a particular living entity? Because living entity desires it. So living entity desires, Lord sanctions and Lord orders material nature through its three modes makes the activities happen. But ultimately the beginning is from desire of a living entity only. So now it may be that we may not have desired something right now, and we may be getting kind of, we may be acting in that way against our desire sometimes, like that. So this is due to our past desires. So that's why through knowledge and association, we need to change the quality of our desires. And there will be allurements and temptations will come to act according to our past desires. But if you are in right knowledge, then we can overcome those allurements and temptations.
And Prabhuji, one more question here. In the translation to this verse, 5.13, Prabhupada is writing, when the embodied living being controls his nature and mentally renounces all actions. So, my question was, what exactly Prabhupada is trying to say by this statement? When embodied living entity controls his nature, does it mean that he like he's not he's controlling his swabhava, or is he engaging
Swabhava.
his
Swabhava.
swabhava?
Here nature means swabhava.
So by controlling it, what does it mean? So is he not acting based on his swabhava, or is he dovetailing his swabhava in Krishna service, or
Both. Especially that swabhava which is unfavorable for devotional service, he will not act upon that. He will restrain himself from that. And that which is all right, it can be engages. So that's why Raisham Prabhu says, kamya karma, vihita karma, nishiddha karma. So there may be some kamya karma, something one may want to do. So if it is, vihita karma is duties. So somebody may act according to his duties. Now some kamya karma is not against Krishna consciousness. It can be doubted. So one can doubtle it. At least as a time being, one can, because one is not fully pure, so one can doubtle and get it purified. But that kamya karma which is against Krishna consciousness, that he will restrain. That he will restrain from. So that's how he controls his nature. Nature means swabhav. Now he may have some swabhav of maybe cruelty, suppose, for example. So he'll try to control it. He will not be, he will not act upon it. But there is some swabhav which is like, maybe, very active. Somebody is very hyperactive by nature. Okay, he'll be very active in Lord service, like that. Ultimately, this swabhav is but basically three modes of material nature. This is not original swabhav. Original swabhav living entity is to be servant of Krishna. But this is the swabhav which I acquired through three modes of material nature only. Like that.
yes, please.
Okay. Okay, Prabhu. So can we stop here? Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So next week we'll continue. Next Friday. Thursday, sorry. Next Thursday. Hari Bol.
Haribol. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
like poem.